and you've brought a couple of people with you, I can see, which is brilliant. And this is a chance really to hear not just about your work as a charity, but also the experience of people who are visually impaired in the way that they interact with our services. And I know you've been speaking with Darren. Darren, I don't know whether you wanted to say anything at the outset, but otherwise it'd be good, Graham, to hear from you, and then a chance for us to have a discussion with you about some of those challenges that the people that you work with face within our community.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Bob. I was just going to do some further introductions. So, Graham Flynn and Judy Pride from Devon Insight, who are Devon's leading sight loss charity. I think I've got that right in the strapline, haven't I? think so. And they've got with them, they're accompanied by Tracy Harper. Tracy is the wife of Mark Harper, who's a client. Mark would normally have been here today, but he's got the dreaded COVID, I'm afraid. So Tracy's here today to let us know what it's like to be on the receiving end of sound services. So without further ado, I'll pass you on to Graham.
Well, thank you, Paul, and thank you, Darren. You've actually covered the first part of my talk by introducing everybody, so that's good. Today I intend to try and do the following: share a few sight loss statistics with you, introduce you to the work of Devon Insight, particularly post-COVID, give you the opportunity to hear from the wife of a client who has just been discharged from the health side of things into the community, and it's I hope that we may be able to work together to improve the patient experience and save you money. That's the reason for talking to you today. I'd also love to hear from anyone on the governing body who would like to champion sight loss moving forward. So that's my invitation to you as a group of people. So let's put sight loss in context. 6 million people are estimated to be living with a sight-threatening condition in the UK today. More than 2 million are estimated to be living with a sight loss which is severe enough to significantly impact on their daily lives. The biggest determinant of the onset of sight loss is older age, and this is a particular issue for Devon due to our higher than average ageing population. The older you are, the greater your risk of sight loss. Now, eye health is now the #1 cause of hospital outpatient attendance in the UK. That's a really good fact. Sight loss in Devon. It's estimated that by 2030, the number of people with sight loss in Devon and Torbay will increase 43% to nearly 56,000 people. Now, Devon is also the 3rd largest county in the country. So issues around rural isolation are accentuated for our clients due to difficulties accessing transport and local services. What's the impact of sight loss? So I'm just looking at the annual report here, and what it says is that it has a significant impact on independence and well-being. Many people have difficulty with basic tasks at home. Many become tentative and fearful of going out. Older people with sight loss are 3 times more likely to experience depression than people with good vision. Another couple of facts here. People aged 65 and older with sight loss are more likely to face multiple health issues, including hearing loss and dementia, and may therefore have complex support needs. Another very significant fact here for you in health is people with sight loss are also more likely to fall and experience hip fractures as a result. Nationally, only 17% of people are offered any emotional support in relation to their deteriorating vision. So what's Devon Insight? Devon Insight is the trading name for the Devon County Association for the Blind, and we're a small registered charity that was established in 1925. Now, there are county associations for the blind around the UK, and most of them emerged out of World War I, supporting troops returning to the UK. And then over time, they've supported people with blind pensions and training. And if you go back to the sort of 30s, 40s, 50s, it's largely around making wicker baskets and blankets for people. That's the only thing that blind people could do. The world is changing. So 2025 marks our centenary, which is quite a milestone. We're often described as being navigators for people with sight loss in Devon. And that's a very important thing for me to get across today. People come to us to try and understand what services are available to them. How are we funded? Well, we receive no statutory funding at all. We have a broad-based funding strategy, which is trusts and grants, community fundraising, personal donations, some corporate support. Sadly, for a lot of charities, things like money from legacies has decreased rapidly. So whereas we used to get massive support from our clients, who were obviously old, that's decreased dramatically over recent years. However, in 2021, we came to the end of a 4-year national lottery reaching communities grant, which let us expand and develop all sorts of exciting community-based things, but that came to an end in 2021, and then we were hit with COVID. Okay, how many people do we support? We support about 2,500 people a year. Some of them with more complex casework, and some of it is just simple advice over the phone. As a charity, we complement the work of high street optometry, so that's opticians. We also support the work of ophthalmology, so the hospital eye unit, so when people are discharged from there, they come to us. And we also work very closely with rehabilitation officers for visual impairment who sit with the sensory teams. So that's social workers who specialise in rehabilitation for people with visual impairment. So now what do we do now as a charity? Our main focus is on providing information, advice and guidance through our helpline and our website. We produce, I don't know if you can see that, that's our magazine. We produce a quarterly magazine called In Vision. We have an independent living service, and this ensures that people have equipment and training in place to help them maintain their independence. And one of the things that emerged out of COVID was that people weren't getting some of those simple little gadgets that make life easier. I like to illustrate talks with a few things. So here's a thing called a community clock, and it's a simple talking clock.
The time is 9:39 a.m.
Lots of our clients cannot see watches clearly, so we've got talking watches, bedside clocks. Another thing increasingly we use is USB players like this one.
Welcome.
Talking books.
Welcome to the spring edition of the Devon Insight.
So we provide information in audio formats. Our health and wellbeing service. This keeps people physically and mentally fit. And for the first time, we've managed to get a little pot of money together to refer people into formal counselling. And that has had a huge impact. So it's a huge impact on a small number of people, but it prevents further deterioration of people's wellbeing and independence. We recently set up a sight loss forum, and this has allowed our clients to have voice, and they are raising issues with us and partner agencies. And yes, you guessed it, they've raised some issues with health as well. And basically it's a platform for people to campaign for change. So when I look at our annual report and the introduction of the annual report, it says our aim is to help our clients live life to the full. And I think that's quite a nice phrase. But we've also got that aspiration with our vision. And this was one of Judy's innovations when she joined me last November, is wouldn't it be lovely to say that Devon was a sight loss friendly county? So that's our sort of vision. Okay, when it comes to more complex client work, we devised in 2016 a sight loss MOT, which is our needs assessment. And that helps people understand their eye condition. And I don't mean that's a medical diagnosis. It's in very simple terms explaining what age-related macular degeneration is and how there is support and training connected with that. Making the best use of your sight, again, with training, low vision training, we can do that sort of thing. We can improve people's health and well-being, managing at home, getting out and about, understanding their finances and entitlements. So some of you may be aware of registration. So the hospital consultant can issue a certificate of visual impairment. Then the person's referred into social services where they'll register as severely visually impaired or visually impaired. And also we encourage people to take an active part in their local community and also meet other people with sight loss. Now that needs assessment, the Sight Loss MOT, was presented at National Conference in 2017. It won a national award for innovation. Last year, we devised a children's MOT, and this reflects the different care and support available to children and young people and their families, particularly around special needs education and transition into work and independent living. That was presented at National Conference in November last year. We won another national award, and like the adult version, it's been taken on board by 20 charities nationally. And we've also got a couple of local authorities that are interested in working with us on that. COVID had a huge impact on us as a charity. We ceased all our community-based meetings, our one-to-one appointments with people, our visits into people's homes. But it did allow us to do some interesting innovation work. So the first thing we did was we mapped all those emerging community-based services for people. Food banks, prescriptions, all that sort of thing. We also produced COVID advice in accessible formats. We found that an awful lot of people were struggling with the information that was being given out in the national press in booklet form. So we produced that in accessible formats in large print and audio. We also worked with Devon County Council on a self-isolation guide for people too. Now, I'd like to invite Judy just to give us a little oversight of two things we did with telephone-based services. So I've just passed over to Judy and I'll have a glass of water. Judy.
One of the things obviously during COVID was that nobody could go anywhere. And we were really worried about our members because they were very isolated like everybody else, but more so because they couldn't see what was going on either. So we developed a phone-based system. It's absolutely free for them to call in. And every Wednesday, we have a free phone get-together, I think is the best way. We call it a chit-chat call, but it's not structured. And one of the interesting things about that opportunity is we're getting around regularly around 12 to 15 members calling in, different people each week, but it's stopped them requiring counselling. It's no-brainer really, isn't it? You give people the opportunity to talk to others in the same situation, ask questions in a safe environment, have a laugh sometimes, because that's really important. And that's made a dramatic difference to lots of people. I've had one lady who says it's the highlight of her entire week. She now structures her entire week around that. And she lives on her own, as do many people, obviously, at this age range and across the rural community. So that happens every week. And once a month we invite a speaker, and that's given a lot of information in a really easy format. You can be sitting in your home and hear some extremely experienced speakers of living with sight loss. And a gentleman only yesterday on our Wednesday call said, do you remember that speaker that was organised by Devon Insight? I followed that up. I've got XYZ now in place. So that's a really useful way of getting people involved. And we'd love to expand that, but like everybody else, it's getting the word out there. And although we spread the word through local press, through things like the networks, through the CDSs, and obviously our own supporters, it would be lovely if there was some extra support to get this message out there, that this easy accessed support free of charge is available. So we're delighted the way that's grown already, and it's only been running just about 5 months now. So it shows that the way ahead is for people to be in their own homes, but access that information that they need to change lives for the better for themselves, putting them in control.
Thanks, Judy. Now, here's my Heath Robinson piece of work from the weekend. Okay, imagine you had age-related macular degeneration, the most common form of sight loss in the UK. As you can see, this affects central vision. So I'm going to try and, so you can see here that the black splodge in the middle, that's damage to the macula at the back of the eye, so you're getting no clear definition. However, round the peripheral, you can see that there's useful sight, and some of the work that we do and with partners is to help people use that sight to read. Now, I suppose the first point I would like to make that's come out from our client forum is appointment letters to hospitals. So I'm going to hold up an appointment letter here from, oh, do I name it? Torbay. This is from a Torbay hospital. It's in standard 12 point. It's on grey paper, and people really struggle to read that. My message today is, wouldn't it be great if we could produce appointment letters in 16-point text where people can read their appointment time and where they're going? So that's my first little point of the day. Now, suddenly, unfortunately, we can't do this in real life, suddenly cure people. That's my first request really of you, is to make appointment letters and information from the hospital more accessible for people. Now, the second point, and Tracy will talk about this in just a moment. We receive a regular complaint from people who are being discharged from hospital services, and the phrase that is used regularly by a consultant is, "There is nothing more we can do for you. Please, can you make an appointment to see me again in 12 months?" And we hear that day in, day out. And I've been hearing it. I've been post 9 years. I hear it every day. People leave the hospital with little or no information and are not aware of the services available to them. And that includes services which are also available in the eye unit, like low vision services. The adult pathway through health and social care is really complex. And I recently had, my mother-in-law has dementia, and I came across this book called The Dementia Guide, Living Well with Dementia. And this is something that I've been wanting to do about sight loss for 8-9 years. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could work together to produce a guide for people in Devon about sight loss? You know, this is funded partly by the NHS, that the Dementia Guide is funded by the NHS, Alzheimer's, postcode lottery and all that sort of thing. It's just an idea. I've already started writing it because I think it's something that we could do ourselves as well, but your support would be really useful. The other thing is, quite often just a simple card, giving a card to a patient just to say, look, there is support for you from Devon Insight, and we can refer people to a range of community-based services, and also ensure that people are interacting with health and social care. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Tracy Harper, who is standing in for her husband, but she has that shared experience. And Tracy, I'm conscious we've only got about 10 minutes left, but could you just give a little bit of an oversight about your experiences and Mark's experiences, and then we'll open up to questions?
Yeah, of course. Excuse me, I am full of cold, not COVID. Mark's got what a condition called the non-arthritic ischematic optic neurology. Excuse me if I got the termination wrong. Very long word. He lost his sight 12 months ago. Literally had the rug pulled from under him. It took him a long time to come to terms with it. The help initially at the start was not too bad. So he was offered counselling, and lucky for him, he had a really good doctor, so was put on antidepressants, but he didn't sleep for 3 months and that. So it was a very rough 6 to 9 months we had. Hospital-wise, there was very little help for that. Once they'd diagnosed him and there was nothing more they could do for him, and they put him on an awful amount of steroids and that really affected his health. He gained 3 stone within a matter of 2 months. When this concern was raised a number of times, but there wasn't really interest in giving him any help towards that. So, you know, back and forth, we jumped through to the doctors, and they're the one. We'd never heard of Devon Insight. Mark had never heard of it. And it was a lucky that we come across a young lady that worked there. She's one of the practitioners, and she put us on to Devon Insight. And since we've done it, Devon Insight, he's lit up like a Christmas tree, because it's gave him a voice that he never had before, because nobody was really interested in listening to the effects that was happening to him. So you've gone from a well-independent man that went to work with no health conditions to somebody that lost his sight overnight. So, well, I mean, at the time, I didn't think Mark was going to make it. He got very suicidal and very dark moments there. But luckily enough, you know, I give him a good kick up the backside because of the job that I do. It's part and parcel of it. So, but yeah, I think a lot more, if Mark was here, he'd be a lot more informative, because he took a lot on board and he has so many great ideas now. And that's since Devon Insight, to be honest with you. He sits and he goes, oh, I'll have to ring Judy over this, or I need to text in, you know. But it's the lack of communication and the lack of help, but the lack of guidance in anything. You know, nothing was introduced technology to us. You know, everything we've got, we've had to ask for. It was never offered. There was never suggestions, or this could make it better, or, you know. So don't really know what more to say about it, but we are grateful that the young lady at the doctors was able to put him forward to Devon Insight. For me, anyway, as his wife, because I've seen a difference in him and his mental health since he's been involved with them. So, you know, he was going down a rocky road before that, and now he's a lot more positive, thankfully.
Thank you, Tracy. That's really good. Paul, I think that's us done. I know we've used quite a lot of time, but I'd like to invite questions.
Graham, Judy and Tracy, thanks to you. That's been really helpful. What I'll do is if people can raise their virtual hands, and when you come in, just introduce yourselves to Graham, Judy and Tracy. That would be really helpful. Tracy, can I just ask, it almost sounds like it was by accident that you found out about Devon Insight, that it wasn't part of a planned signposting for you within. It was just that you happened to be passing that particular member of staff at that time. Have I got that right? And if so,
absolutely. He went for something completely different. He went for help with housing, to be honest with you, because we need to find a property that's for Mark that's accessible. At the moment, we don't have that, so it was stumbling on this person that actually deals with welfare needs. And then Mark asked her a question, is there anybody or anywhere out there that I can sort of get involved with? Because like going at 100 miles an hour in a job that he'd done to doing nothing at all affected him massively mentally. And he just wanted to meet like-minded people that understood him as his wife. And, you know, you go through the motions and that, but I don't understand what it's like to be blind, you know? So yeah, and that she said, oh, you know, there is this charity, maybe they could help. So Mark had to do all the ringing and the forwarding and stuff like that. So
yeah, and you know, we talk a lot within the NHS about how we need to work better with those organisations, particularly where medicine isn't the answer. And where other things can be the answers, such as the things that, you know, that Devon Insight can offer. I think that's a challenge that we take back and we talk with our providers about, and I'll do that about how that can be. It doesn't have, you know, we don't need to rely on accidental conversations. We need to be a little bit more purposeful about signposting people to getting the help they need. Andrew, can I bring you in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Graham and Judy and Tracy. Really interested in your insights and experience.
Sorry, Andrew, you just introduce yourself, please.
Oh yeah, sorry. My name's Andrew Millward. I'm Director of Communications, HR and Corporate Affairs. And it was an offer, really, Graham, to you and your colleagues that perhaps Darren and I, in our roles, arranged to meet with you, because I think what we could do is explore some of the things that are your asks, like the appointment letters, your new handbook, etc., which I'm sure we could support. So is an offer there, really. We'd value meeting with you.
That's fantastic news. Thank you very much. Thank you. Paul, I'm just conscious of one other thing that's just come into my mind. I recently had a call from a new member of staff at the I unit in Exeter, and one of the things she said that is in her and I'm not sure if she's an optometrist or an ophthalmologist or whatever, but anyway, she's had formal NHS training. She came to me and she was quite distressed, and she basically said that she had received no formal training about giving bad news to patients and supporting patients at all. And she's coming to see me next week, and it's kind of nice. And I just think that that's perhaps another HR issue, is just to be aware that I know what it's like with my team when they're receiving phone calls from people, and particularly during the COVID period, where people were being forced together at home. We had some safeguarding issues as well as the diagnosis issues, and I think that also applies to staff as well. And I'm trying to support my staff with bad news. Not that I give bad news, but it'd be interesting to look at that dynamic as well.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful, Graham. I've got David and Gaynor. So let's take those couple of questions, and then I think that's probably just those two questions. Then, please, David.
Hi, my name's David Greenwell. I'm a GP in South Devon. My question really is about not the clinical situation where somebody's being told there's nothing more I can do, which, as we've said, is almost always not the right approach. But I'm interested in the stage before that, the conversation that is, there is something I could do, but it would carry quite a lot of risk. So what I'm interested in is shared decision making. So in other words, when an intervention carries significant risk, how you help a patient to make decisions about those procedures. And I suspect that almost none of that conversation is what can be done to help somebody with their sight if they don't have that high risk procedure. So the conversation may well be, if you have this procedure, there's a 10% chance you'll lose your sight completely and a 30% chance you'll have a massive improvement. But unless you fully understand how your current sight could be maximised, it's very hard to make that decision. I'm just wondering if that might be an area where a charity like yours could actually get involved much earlier to help people with decision making about surgery.
There's one remit that we have as a charity is that we are not medical professionals. So we do not give medical advice, we give general advice. So if we're talking about age-related macular degeneration, it's in general terms. But what we can do is early intervention is critical with all of this stuff. Simply improving lighting, particularly for reading, referring people into low vision services so they're getting a correct magnifier will make a significant difference to people. Judy, can you think of anything here that?
I think one of the big things is the emotional choice. To be faced with the choice, as you've just outlined, you know, do I have this surgery or not? If you can speak to somebody that is living currently with the level of sight loss you are experiencing already and know that they're living life well and going off, as Mark has just done, he's just come back with Tracy from a holiday in the Caribbean. To know that actually living with it, if you don't want to take that big risk, is not the end of the world. And I think to speak to some of our other existing clients who will share that life experience as it is now, I think would be very valuable to know what, what could happen. As Grace said, it could be some information about, are you maximising your sight currently? But actually it's about that emotional, how are you living your life? Because it isn't the end of the world to live with sight loss. No. I wish you could have heard Mark talking to the others about his recent Caribbean cruise, because he's inspired others to have a go, even though they're living with probably more sight than he has.
Great.
Yeah,
Tracy,
definitely.
did you want to come in here?
Yeah, Mark is a great inspiration to other people because he has literally gone full circle with it from where he was in a very dark place. He's so positive about life, and he enjoyed the holiday. Yes, it was very much well. They could improve this and they could improve that, which was brilliant because he took that on board. But it's also like listening to different people talk. What brings it out for me, because I work for the healthcare, is the terminology that is used when talking to people. Like when Mark was first offered counselling, Mark thought, because that's somebody's going to get in my head. I don't want that. I think the conversation needs to be changed for people to understand what anybody's actually saying to them. So if you want to have counselling, don't mention the word counselling. Just say, let's have a conversation. It all starts with a conversation. And I think that changed Mark's perspective of counselling, because he thought, okay, if I've only got to talk, I don't want to talk to a counsellor, but if I've only got to talk, that made the difference. So I think how a person is spoken to needs to be scaled down and put into layman's terms, if that's a better word for it. Because if people don't understand the big words, and they get scared. I see it every day in my job. And once you bring it down to a conversation they can understand, you get a lot further with somebody. But yeah, Mark loved his holiday.
Tracy, that's really wise. That's really wise. And we always, particularly, you know, everyone, whether it be clinicians or managers within the team here, we very quickly slip into that's the sort of language that we use day in, day out. But often, as you say, it's not only that it's foreign to many people, but actually it can be quite daunting. Yeah, so that's really
surgery based. It's not a problem. I mean, Mark's doctors have been excellent. It's a hospital. It's a consultants.
Yeah.
You know, they're very good at what they do, but people skills sometimes are not there in all of them. So, you know, you get a good, not criticising everybody, but, you know, the ones that we've took, you know, yeah, people, they lack people skills. They really do, you know, so.
Thanks, Tracy. Gaynor, last comment from you then.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks ever so much, Graham, Judy and Tracy as well. It was really, really interesting. I'm Gaynor Appleby. I'm a non-executive director. I'm an occupational therapist as well. So I'm very, very keen on gadgets and equipment and things like that. And I really, really value the ROVI service, the rehabilitation officers for the visually impaired. My question is, they're such a resource. How do somebody that gets who loses their vision, how do they get referred to them? Do they have is there a way like they come to you and you refer, or you know, does the GP refer? How do you get access to them?
Clients can self-refer. GP can refer, hospital can refer, anybody can refer. Literally, you can pick up the phone and ring Care Direct and ask to speak to them. They are a very valuable service, but there is one shadow over their work, and it's the word social services, social worker. We always use rehabilitation officer, or if we know where somebody lives, we'll say, do you know Jane? We don't even use the name, because that label prevents a huge number of people from accessing those services. And part of the journey that we go on with clients is to say, look, wouldn't it be great if you could have this done for you, so you know about entitlements, you know, the benefits you can get, you can save money here. When it comes to mobility, use of white cane training, that sort of thing, we raise what the issue is that could be corrected, and then it's, oh, these are the people that you can help. But that statutory service is really important, and we try not to stand on the toes there. We refer into it. But we can help with a whole load of other things like talking books and talking papers, local community groups and that sort of thing. We work very closely with Alison Bagnall, who runs the sensory team in Devon. Yeah, Alison's great. We've been working together for the last 9 years. Very good team.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Tracy. And can you thank Mark for us for willing to let you share his story? And I hope that he is recovering from COVID.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. It is really good to hear these things, and really good to hear that there are often some really simple things that we can make, as you say, Graham, like, you know, the type size or some of the language that we use that actually can go a long way in improving people's experience in the way they interact with our health services. So thank you for your time this morning, and we will let you get on with your days. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody.
Great. So I have got, the only apology I have got is from Sarah Wollaston, but otherwise I don't have any more apologies for today. I do have one question from the public, and it's quite apt given what we have just heard. So this question is from Anne Marchant, and Anne, I will give you a brief summary of our response, but we'll make sure that we get you a full written response that I have available here. I'll make sure that I get that sent to you after the meeting. But essentially, Anne's question is, what is in place to ensure the deaf people in Devon have equal access to psychotherapy? So very relevant in what we've been talking about, and I think it is right for us to acknowledge that experience for people with hearing impairment is not always as good as it should or can be. We have got plenty of things in place. We've got a contract with Sign Solutions and with Relay UK to help people make their appointments. And in fact, Devon Partnership Trust, who provide a lot of our psychotherapy services, use Sign Solutions in order for people to pre-book sign language video interpreters. So that is in place. And there is access to national services for children and young people and for adults to receive mental health support if they also have hearing loss. For children and adolescents, that's provided by Somerset, and then the adult services in southwest London. We're hoping very soon that we'll see some significant improvement in that, because Sign Health earlier this month were awarded an NHS England contract to deliver talking therapies in British Sign Language on behalf of the NHS. We have yet to see what that means for Devon, but certainly we're optimistic that that will enhance the offer. So we will keep working on it. We will keep that, particularly that new opportunity, under review, and of course we'll be in contact if any of that changes. But Anne, I will send you a full letter response to that after this meeting. I just noticed in the chat there were other apologies. Yes, of course. Thanks, Jane. Nick Kennedy has also sent his apologies. Okay. Thank you very much. So we've then got register of interests. So I'm just going to ask if anyone needs to update those, or are there any particular conflicts of interest that are relevant to the matters at hand for today's meeting? David.
Just to say, I've emailed you a particular interest, which at the moment has to remain confidential, but I will discuss any conflicts of interest with you privately.
Yeah, that's fine. So I have had that from David, and I've looked through today's agenda, and the conflict that David has does not cause an issue with any of today's agenda items. Okay, thanks, David. Okay, so minutes from the last meeting from the 24th of February. If I go through them, this is for accuracy, page 1 and 2, page 3 and 4, page 5, 6, and 7 and 8. So we will take that as an accurate representation, an accurate record of the governing body from last month. There are two actions, both from last month's meeting. The first one, Darren, this was a conversation around the conversion rates for breast cancer was mentioned in the meeting of being pretty much the same as pre-pandemic levels, and you were going to look and see if we could get hold of the conversion figures for other cancers. Any update on that?
Yeah. So we are working with the Cancer Network on that, so we have got some preliminary data. I would propose that I bring something back in the integrated performance report at the next meeting, Paul, just because I think I've got the raw data. I now need to do a little bit of analysis around that to say, give some detail around what that actually is telling us in terms of that conversion rate. It's very different across each pathway, as you would expect. So I will propose to bring that back to the next meeting.
Okay, thanks. So we'll leave that open and we'll make sure that that's covered off in next month. Okay, and then Jane and Simon, this was an item for when we were talking about the inequalities, item 11 within the minutes. The fairer funding report was referred to, and then there was a request for this to be shared with governing body.
Yeah, sorry, Paul, I missed this one. I think by then I I'd moved on to another meeting, so apologies for that. I think it means the fair shares report that came to governing body probably 18 months, 2 years ago, I think, isn't it? So I had a very quick chat with John this morning, and John's going to dig out the report that Ben Chilcott wrote, and we'll circulate it.
Right. Okay. So let's leave that open just to make sure that we can go around the loop and that that's happened between now and the next governing body meeting. Okay. All right. Thank you both. So that then takes us on to the clinical chairs report. I don't have a written report. A lot of the things that I have been involved in will be covered in the rest of the paper, or certainly in the briefings that we've had in between the formal governing body meetings. The only thing that I was going to say is that I am currently in conversation with both the non-executives and the clinicians here, because we are about to enter what feels like a transition period where there's a shadow board forming for what will be the integrated care board that will come into formal existence pending legislation on the 1st of July, and that's starting to sort of come together now and will be developing over the next 3 months. But in parallel to that, we as the CCG still have our statutory responsibilities to commission for the population of Devon, and we still have to hold that accountability and be making those decisions on behalf of our population. So we are in discussion about how we best do that in this interim period in order to make sure that we have as smooth a transfer as possible, and that will involve, in one way or another, some closer working with this established board. So once we've got an understanding of how best we can do that, that fosters that relationship and that dialogue whilst maintaining our autonomy and our statutory responsibilities, then I will certainly bring that back and explain to governing body members, and we'll get a formal agreement as to how we're going to continue that relationship. I wasn't planning on necessarily taking any questions on that. I think that is something that we just need to continue to get to a position of agreement on. So I'm going to move straight on to the Accountable Officers report. Jane.
Thank you, Paul. And got a bit of an echo there. Okay, I'll keep talking and hopefully it'll disappear. So quite a lot in the report, and as always, quite a lot of things keep continuing to move forward apace. So just, I suppose, just picking up that point, Paul, just in relation to this next 3 months. As part of the transition, I think we are well on track in terms of the timelines for submitting what we need to submit. We have our latest development plan that goes in this Friday, and then we also have a meeting with regional colleagues on the 13th of June. I think it's fair to say there are still some questions in relation to some of the interface with regions, so particularly in terms of delegated commissioning. So what will that look like? And also going forward, I think it's fair to say that other areas will change, particularly in relation to emergency preparedness. So some of that guidance is coming through, and that will obviously have an impact on how we arrange ourselves in terms of staffing, but actually also how the governance and architecture looks to go forward. I wanted just to say, though, just in terms of this and also what else is in the report, which I'm sure Darren will pick up a lot as we get into the sort of the quality report, this all of the work that we're doing in relation to managing the current COVID challenge, which I understand will continue with us for at least the next week or two, and I'm sure Lincoln will testify to that account. It's difficult to say, but certainly the impact of staff sickness particularly seems to be almost worse than it was in wave 1. But that, as well as I say, trying to also get ourselves aligned and prepared to submit our operating plan, which I know we will be picking up later, is at a time when staff are incredibly tired and having to work and do things that are different to perhaps what their day jobs used to be. So I just want to take the opportunity to thank everybody and thank all colleagues for the amazing work everyone's doing to sort of pull together this. As I say, the COVID peaks and troughs, but the actual work that we are required to do seems to get more. So, but that is the NHS for you. I think the other thing to say is, and again, we'll pick this up as we go into the body, quite a considerable amount of pressure, I suppose, at the moment in terms of managing also, as I say, not just the urgent care pressures, but throughout the whole pathway. And what we haven't included in here is work that we will be starting with our social care colleagues and our domiciliary care colleagues, and actually our care home collaboratives, in terms of how we can look at the models of care within reablement to support that flow, because I think we recognise and part of the national ask at the moment is for us to really focus on and really ensure that people are aware, if they're not already, of the challenges of ambulance handovers and ambulance waiting times. But certainly from my perspective, that is obviously a symptom of the problem, not the cause. So there is something that is significantly changed as a result of COVID and a result of how we have supported people being discharged home. We're now at a stage that we need to do something quite different to ensure that people are supported and into further reablement and further sort of more I suppose community first, but actually also in terms of more independence. So then the other thing just to add is that we did, as part of our soft 4 process, have a formal board-to-board meeting with David Sloman, who's the Chief Operating Officer. Steve Proctor, who's the Medical Director, popped in as well. And as I say, of course, the real focus on that is in relation to our position in terms of our performance, as I've said, also our financial position, and as well as our Devon transformation plan. I think it's fair to say we recognise we've got more work to do on that collectively. And then the other thing just to add, I think we are starting, as we've done with board members, starting to think a bit about that transition and how do we bring together the successes and achievements that have been sort of moved and continue to be driven forward as part of the CCG and the CCG board. So I know Andrew Millward and colleagues are helping to shape that, which will be part of our annual plan. But I think certainly it's very important to, as part of the transition and the handing over the baton almost, that we do take time to reflect on all of that and don't lose any of the sort of organisational memory or the sort of achievements that we have had during that last phase. So I'm going to leave it there, I think, Paul.
Thank you very much, Jane. So any questions or comments for Jane? Glynis.
Yeah, hi Jane, thank you very much for your report. Couple of questions. One is a sort of general question about the Children's Services Review, which isn't referenced in the report or in the Performance and Quality report. As I understand it, that has been delayed again, and this was commissioned at least a year ago. And I just wondered whether you know when we can expect to see that report. And then my second question was about your sections 4 about mental health, learning disabilities and autism. And the second bullet point around priorities is develop a clearer and more widespread focus on the needs of autistic people and their families. But I just wonder whether that should be a bit more specific around reducing the waiting list, because we won't know the needs until that waiting list for diagnosis is reduced.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if Joe wants to pick up by both of those, really. I mean, I think certainly, yes, I mean, I agree when we met as a team yesterday to talk a bit about the priorities, and I think certainly, in fact, actually looking at the national statistics, we know that previously, pre-COVID, 1 in 9 children had some form of well, I don't know what the autism sort of statistics are, but certainly in this particular area, COVID has a huge impact. So we are in a position where we are trying to address probably challenges pre-COVID in this area, but now exacerbated by the current situation. And of course, workforce is not without its challenge in this area. So, but I know that certainly real focus. So, Jo, can I hand over to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Glynis, for both those questions. I'll start with the one that Jane was picking up there in terms of the waiting list that we have specifically around autism and ADHD as well. Actually, so pre-COVID, Jane was absolutely right. We did have a focus, and we invested in terms of reducing both children's waiting times and adult waiting times. And we'd done the piece of analysis there that enabled us to understand what we needed to do to get back down to 18 weeks in both, and we invested sufficiently. But of course, as you know, COVID has meant that in those areas, as Jane said, they've particularly been areas that have been affected for one reason or another. So we're working with providers at the moment, and we've got a new contract with a provider which is helping us support in terms of some of the adult waiting times for ADHD. So that's currently in train already, and the piece of work that we are kicking off, although we need a little bit of capacity to focus on this area, is around how we can what we need to do differently in the pathway, particularly supporting people up front, so pre-referral as well, and that's a piece of work that we're currently starting to undertake with providers at the moment. In terms of children, we have invested to reduce the waiting list back down to 18 weeks. We've put additional investment in the last year, so that was also agreed. So we've got a trajectory that takes us down, as you know, Glynis, to enable us to get back down to 18 weeks for that as well. So work is ongoing, and it is an area of focus. And as Jane said, we were talking about it yesterday in terms of our priorities. The other area you mentioned was children's review. So we agreed that, so governing body asked for us to undertake a review of the children's contracts. We agreed that we wanted to do that as a system, so in partnership with our providers. So we have a draft report, I'm pleased to be able to say, and we've undertaken, as part of that, a significant amount of engagement with staff, with patients, with carers. So it has taken a long time to get to the place where we are, but as you can imagine, it's sort of stopped and stalled quite significantly in between in terms of COVID. But we have undertaken all of that work now. We do still need to undertake some more financial and activity analysis before we can sign the report off. So I'd say we're probably about 2 months away from being able to do that and bring that back to governing body. But yeah, it's kind of obviously been hampered by some of the other pressures in the system.
Can I just say, Jo, thank you for that. It would be good if this governing body could see this before the ICS comes into being, because it's been a big area of concern, certainly I think for this governing body, but also for the quality committee during the time that I've chaired it. Yeah,
understood, Glynis.
Thanks, Jo. Thanks, Glynis. David.
So can I just come back on that question? As I understand it, there is no service for ADH or autism referrals between the ages of 16 and 19, because referrals made at the age of 16 will be returned by paediatrics because of the length of the waiting list and not accepted by the adult service. So if you present between the ages of 16 and 18, you have to wait until your 18th birthday, and then once you get to your 18th birthday, you join a 2-year waiting list. So actually, if you present at the age of 16, it's unlikely you're going to get seen before the age of 20. Jo, I'd really like you to actually check the validity of that, but I've recently had a referral for a 16-and-a-quarter-year-old returned from paediatrics and refused by the adult service. So I'd really like you, if you could, just to check that is policy, that there is no service available for those people.
Yeah, so I can be clear that it's certainly not commissioning policy, David. So if you can give me that the detail, just because it will be helpful just to be able to track. If you can send me the detail, I will specifically look into that. Okay, thanks.
I had one other question. Can I sneak in a second question, which was really to Jane, and that's really again another piece of potential clinical harm in the last week. I'm just wondering if we are satisfied that our model of caring for people in ambulances outside A&E is the right model of care. I absolutely understand that that is simply a symptom of deficiencies elsewhere in the system, and particularly about discharges, but we are still endorsing that as a model of care rather than seeking some other place to look after people so that ambulances can respond to 999 calls.
Yes, I mean, Paul and Darren have both been involved in a lot of this work and trying to look at different solutions. And I think the other thing is that we're also trying to ensure that we are sharing best practice across each of the individual providers, because I think certainly that the sort of quick triage of people who arrive by ambulance by each of the the ED consultants is one that we believe is one to be replicated, but that also is a challenge with some of the staffing levels. So I think there's a huge amount of work happening in this, and also working with SWAST teams and trying to also support them in how they can staff some of the sort of the handover arrangements as well. And I know that in Cornwall currently they have put in place a temporary structure to support a small number of people in that in a different way, so that it can repatriate ambulances. I think there is there are estate sort of challenges in terms of that for any of the sites in Devon, but actually also I think there's still something to be tested out in terms of that as being a safe model of care as well. So I don't know, Darren, did you want to just add on that, because this occupies probably everybody on this call in my teams every day for most of the day, I think it's fair to say at the moment. But Darren.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jane, and thanks, David. I think it is a real wicked, it's a national issue, and I think you need to sort of put on public record that ultimately we don't support that as a model of care. We recognise it at the moment. It is a model of care that unfortunately patients are being subjected to, and trying to work with clinical teams and pathways to make that safe. But I think the things we have to look at is, one, how we get a more dynamic handover process, how we work much more as a system to try and not balance, because actually it's never going to be completely equal, but how we balance the risk much more across the entire system, recognizing the challenges that faces. I think the other thing actually, because if we look at the delayed, there is the element around the long waits outside in front of our EDs and the potential harm that does cause. Obviously, we also know then that is a delay in our CAP 2 responses. So the mean time, those are probably the most critical patients for ambulances to respond to. The median expected to be 40 minutes, and we're somewhere around the 90th centile of 2 hours. And if we look at, particularly our SWAST data around, some of the best see and treat and hear and treat in the country. So the other debate is actually that see and treat model. Again, is that the right model of care? Because actually, if those individuals could be seen by somebody else not taking up a 999 double crewed ambulance or a rapid response vehicle. So I think probably to give you a level of assurance, we are very focused around how we break the cycle of the model of care that results in patients waiting too long outside the front doors of our EDs, but also how can we work with our SWAS colleagues and our rapid response teams to do a different model, so that actually we haven't also got ambulances tied up at patients' homes or in the community, that actually another model of care within our community sector could be more appropriate for that individual. So I think we're coming out of this two angles, and ultimately, even if we got the best discharges, and that improved, we will still see too many patients in ED at the moment. So that there are probably 3 elements that we really absolutely go at to break the cycle of what has become I won't say accepted, because it is a level of concern, but a model of care that has become more the norm.
Yeah, I suppose what I was really worried about, it's not the patients who have been assessed and are sitting in an ambulance with the trained crew. It's the people who are waiting.
Absolutely.
For the most urgent. So the clinical case I've been involved with this week was an MI who waited an excessive amount of time because there was no ambulance available, because the ambulance was sitting in a queue. Yeah. And it's that if we accept this as a model of care, the harm is to the patient who hasn't been assessed, who's at home waiting for the ambulance.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more, David. I think you had that undifferentiated call stack challenge within the SWAS, and as you say, the cardiac episodes, the gastric episodes that are sat at home with that, should be a 40-minute response time. Hitting a 2-hour, and beyond response time is the area that we absolutely need to work collectively on, and our SWAS colleagues are absolutely in the room when we're having those senior conversations.
Thanks. I think, David, is just the language to report. We don't accept, and we shouldn't accept this as our model of care. And I think that reflects, as Jane says, the amount of effort and energy that is going in to try and change the experience that both our patients and the ambulances and the ED departments are having. So I think that's really clear that we shouldn't stop doing everything we possibly can to change this and reduce the impact that it's having on those patients waiting at home and the patients in the back of the ambulance. Joe, can I just ask, I just need to go back to that point. Can I ask then we need to close the loop. Can you come back next month? Because that may not be our commissioning approach for 16 to 19-year-olds, but just to confirm that you've investigated with our providers as to what the approach is for those 16 plus children who are referred on for that assessment, please. That would be really helpful. Simon.
Thanks, Paul. One for Jane and one for Darren, if that's possible. Jane, you mentioned in your report the supportive meetings that we've had with NHS England and NHS Improvement, and perhaps the opportunity for a more open dialogue with chief execs and senior managers of the Devon system. Can you sort of just broaden that or elaborate a little bit more on what are the sort of things that perhaps were talked about, and whether that gives us confidence that moving forward into a more collaborative partnership may deliver some things that we may not have been able to deliver before? And the other thing for Darren was, with the Spring Booster programme, just curious to know if we've got a plan for the housebound and the care home patients, because primary care is not being commissioned to do that work, and do we have a credible plan to deliver the vaccines to that very vulnerable group, given that primary care is going to be focusing on its business as usual? Thank you.
Okay, I'll pick up briefly, because in fact that's probably a long, it'll probably take up most of the meeting to pick up your first question, Simon. I think it's fair to say, so as we move into the sort of this next phase of the NHS Devon, or the One Devon and the Integrated Care Board, I mean, part of the supporting governance will be much firmer sort of leadership framework, which ensures that we have our clinical leads and our chief exec leads across the whole system, including local authorities, are leading a number of our work streams and a number of our subgroups in a different way to what we have now. So, and I think through that, as well as work in terms of the acute provider collaborative, as an example, will also, I think, ensure that we've got clearer system in sort of sign up and focus on delivery rather than through individual organisations. So I think it's fair to say that's work in progress, and again building on work that's already taken place. So, for example, Suzanne Tracy is the planned care SRO jointly with Mark Hallerton, who's medical director of UHP, as you know, on that programme of work. And again, I know Liz Davenport from Torbay has come to present the work around the Devon plan. So, but I think underpinning this, of course, is some further work some development work, not just with chief execs or clinical leads, but actually also throughout the whole organisation. And then lastly, I'd say that we're also looking at a process, a job planning, which also incorporates within, again, not everybody across in each organisation, but where it makes sense. So within everybody's job plan, there is a system-facing component. So actually, it sort of bakes it in to that, as opposed to perhaps what we've done in the past, which is sort of, I suppose, people have entered or undertaken some of these roles in perhaps in a less formal way. So trying to, as much as possible, formalise what we've already started.
Okay, thank you.
And then Darren around vaccinations.
Yeah. So we are running it through a hub and spoke model, Simon. So potentially running it out of the mass vaccination sites. So obviously Greendale for East, ERC, through support of the Torbay community team in Torbay, Basketball Leisure Centre, and then Home Park. So that's very much in terms of plans for housebound is pretty much there now, and those have already started. Care homes, again, we have already started in care homes, and obviously the guidance at the moment is very much around older persons care homes, but we're having a low threshold in terms of making sure that we support all vulnerable care homes. One of the things that I'm looking particularly, I know Lincoln and Steve are both on the call, is working with our public health teams, because ultimately we've got a huge number, obviously high community prevalence of COVID at the moment, which obviously is reflective in terms of significant outbreaks within our care home sector. So ensuring that we don't delay vaccination in care homes and able to cross the threshold safely in those particular areas. So plans are well advanced. So teams have already started to go out both to care homes and housebound. And I think hopefully we can do a relatively light touch with primary care, because we've managed to keep registers over the first 3 cycles. So we generally know, I think, there will be a touch base primary care to make sure that no one's either been added to the list, but so we don't miss anybody.
Thank you. I think primary care will be very pleased to hear that. I was at Greendale myself yesterday and was very impressed with the delivery process. So thank you for that.
Great. Thank you. And Jane, you can take breath now, but Darren, you can't. So 8.1, the integrated performance and quality report.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm conscious of time, and I'll keep it relatively brief and then happy to take questions. Obviously, the report has gone through a number of the subgroups of governing bodies, so we have gone into a number of conversations in detail, but I suppose just a few things to draw the governing body's attention to. As you'll note, the presentation continues to evolve, so we're moving now very much more in terms of hopefully a more robust template, which gives a bit of the so what. So yeah, we know that actually, and I think a number of the governing bodies comments have been, a lot of the metrics we are quite stuck, we are quite challenged in those particular areas, and seeing small step changes, whether that be positive or negative. So it's so what in terms of the actions and the impacts they're having, and the next couple of iterations will start to reflect the ops plan. So that can be very clear that our integrated performance report reflects the ambitions and the actions that we're taking as a system, and then we can truly measure those impacts. But in terms of some of the highlights or lowlights, shall I say, the long waits in planned care remain high. I think in terms of the time this report was published or produced in February, there was a clear ambition that we were on plan with the trajectories in the report. I think the high and sustained COVID numbers through February and March, I think to give a indication that might put those trajectories, well, I certainly will put those trajectories at risk, and you'll see those reflected in forthcoming reports. Obviously, long waits along our urgent care pathway as well, and that's actually interesting despite a reduction in ambulance presentations. So we talked earlier about the see and treat, hear and treat. So we actually have seen a reduction in ambulance presentations to ED, but actually walk-ins have continued to increase. So the net impact is about 11% increase that we've seen in terms of attendances through February, and coupled with an increasing and high 111 abandonment rate, which is significant. And if we look at just one metric in terms of ambulance hours lost at handovers, so in February that was 6,000 hours alone, so that's the equivalent of 8 double crewed ambulances lost to the system for the entire month of February. And it goes back to our conversation, David, around we absolutely we do not tolerate this or do not accept this as a model of care, and we've got to do everything we can to reduce those numbers. What we're also seeing is an increasing impact of the planned care waits on our primary care and urgent and emergency care pathways. So individuals that are on planned care pathways presenting with urgent need. So that is an area that we're looking at, particularly around harm and the impact of harm on planned care. So more of that to come in future reports. Unfortunately, cancer position has also deteriorated in month, but actually our bed capacity within the care home market has increased. So that has helped in terms of seeing some real green shoots in terms of the delayed transfers of care. And you look particularly at somewhere like West Devon, where we've seen a reduction from an average delay transfer or average delay of 15 days to discharge down to 8.9 days, with an ambition to go down to 5 days by the end of April. So there are some green shoots in that area, which hopefully will help some of the urgent care pathway flows and the planned care. The improvements in diagnostics that were reported in the last governing body were not sustained, so we saw a slight drop in month, but I think the impact that we've seen continue around infection control. We are seeing some new infection control guidance, but the numbers of COVID patients are the highest that we've seen through the entire pandemic, and obviously that's having a significant impact on flow and pathways. Other areas continue to see increased mental health referrals in paediatrics, particularly so CAMS referrals increasing, and we are continuing to look at the metrics. And I know we've had these conversations before around the referral acceptance rate, so getting into position around appropriateness of referrals. That is proving a little bit challenging, but I think we're nearly there now. So hopefully, again, more to come in at the next governing body. Access to eating disorders, again, remains a challenge, and that is now on our risk register and has been discussed with the Quality and Assurance Committee. And if I then finally go on to staffing, as we would expect with the current high prevalence, our sickness absence has continued to increase. I would say that has plateaued now, but it has plateaued at a significant high level. That said, turnover has remained static, which I think is positive, recognising that we do see normally in February, March, an increase in turnover. So that is positive, but in coupling in terms of our escalation areas, increased agency spend. And then let's finish on a positive. There is some really good feedback within the data around primary care access and the improvements to primary care access. So I think, again, recognising the primary care challenges, but probably the fact of releasing from vaccine programs and things is definitely showing some improvements in terms of perceptions around access. So I will leave it there, Chair, and take any questions.
That's great, thank you, Darren. And can I just it is a very comprehensive report, and there's a huge amount of detail in there, but actually it's really good to see all of that triangulating and all of that coming together in that one pack. So thank you. I know there's a lot of work has been gone into getting that into the position that it's in. John W.
Thanks. Thanks, Darren. As usual, it's a great report. Talking about workforce, sickness is one thing, vacancies is another, and the vacancies look a real concern to me, particularly in Northern Devon. We look on page, I think it's 88 of 167. We'll see the vacancy rate in NDHT is particularly high. And it's very hard to provide a good, effective service if you've got some members of staff off sick, but also nobody coming in the pipeline. The vacancies are not being filled. So could you just go a little bit deeper into what we're doing about vacancies, particularly in DPT and NDHT?
Yeah, so in terms of a number of approaches, John, and I think you're absolutely right, where we should not, we should ignore the vacancies that are peril. So a number of elements. So quite a lot of overseas recruitment. I know that's a very short-term measure, but we are seeing a large number of individuals coming from overseas in the next few months, both in terms of North Devon. Devon Partnership Trust have seen for the first time some really positive improvements in overseas recruitment. We're working on a national level to drive, particularly as we get into Easter, a bit of an attraction around the southwest and particularly Devon and those particular areas. So again, I know we've tried that over many times. The other area, and this is particularly for North Devon, is trying to understand the very specific hard to recruit, because I think we can look at as a system level, there are specific roles, acute medical physicians is a classic example of that. Some of the very specialists around AHP is very specific, but actually that's at a system level. If we go into somewhere like North Devon, what we're looking at is potentially how can we shift, potentially how can we do those roles differently? So rather than going out to advertise for the same role for the fifth time, because some of these roles have been vacant for many years, it's about how do we do, I don't want to say service redesign, but actually skills-based, so skills-based workforce rather than almost role-based workforce, and that is starting to pay dividends. And I think North Devon with the stroke pathway is a good example of that, where the nurse consultants, therapy consultants are leading the way compared to a very traditional medical model. Again, with the ANPs and the named practitioners above the bed in Devon Partnership Trust, shows a different approach to patient care that actually has the same, if not better, outcomes in many cases.
And is there a view on the merger and whether the merger will have an impact on this vacancy challenge with RD&E and NDHT?
So I think it's early days. I think some of the immediate elements is becoming one organisation. It does make it slightly easier for staff to move across from one site to the other because it's one organisation rather than one organisation and a supporting organisation. So I think there is ambition that it certainly will improve, but I think at the moment that is still something that we would need to see translate into outcomes, if I'm honest, John.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. I've got a number of hands, but let's take them in pairs. David and Judy. So David first, and then Judy, and then we'll come back to you, Darren, once we've been through those.
Darren, you probably know what I'm going to ask you about. I was very pleased to hear you say that you'd been working on trying to get figures for mental health referrals which were returned without assessment. And you mentioned children's mental health. I just wanted to make sure that was happening in adult mental health as well.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'll come back to that.
That's no, do that. That's a quick yes or no, isn't it?
So, so
yes
absolutely, absolutely, whole life cycle. So adults and children.
Okay, Judy.
So mine is a slightly different point. I really admire actually the way you've pulled this report together, Darren and the team that have worked with him. It has become more and more informative. It is becoming easier and easier to understand. My concern sometimes as a non-exec is how do I deal with all the information that's in this? And one of the concerns I have about the current crisis mode we're working in is that we focus a lot of our energy on the crisis. Of course we have to, that's what we've been focusing on. But sometimes there are problems looming in the background. What I'm going to ask Darren is there someone in your team or somewhere else in the organisation who is looking at this full report with so much information saying, is this a problem a year down the line? Is this something? And the example I'm going to use is on page 96 in the outcomes report. In the health visitor, this is micro, but it is an example of this sort of thing. In the health visitors, seeing people within 14 days, Devon County Council is in as 14%. I find that probably an error in the statistics, but if it's true, all the stuff we're talking about with children's services, that is a problem if we're not getting into a parent within 14 days. So don't focus on the example. It's the example that made me think, are we doing the preemptive thinking about stuff coming forward? Have we got staff that are able to sit and do that whilst everybody else is focusing on the crisis?
Just let's take Simon Kerr as well, and Darren, you may want to bring other people in. Jane may want to talk about that because you're talking about how you're structuring the teams anyway, aren't you, to make sure that we're able to do that. So maybe that's one for Jane if you're able to pick that up. But Simon.
Yeah, so what's really good for me, Darren, about this report is your statements around actions, impacts, and when those impacts will be realised. I think that's really, really good. Thank you. But my two words of caution are, one, if we're going to be sending patients with complex orthopaedic surgery off to southwest London, we really need to be very, very careful that we've got a pathway back if things go wrong. Because I've learned that in previous times gone by with fund holding, we had patients sent a long way away who didn't have a recovery process when they came back to Devon. And the other thing is for the digital locum bank for primary care, we're finding that it's not been helpful for us. In fact, it's created more work in some cases. The doctors that are working for that service are specifying very clearly all they want to do is to do pre-planned appointments. They don't want to be involved in urgent care work, which is where we need help. And what worries me even more is some of the young docs are going straight into that. And some of my salaried docs are even looking at it as quite an attractive opportunity alternative for them to step away from working in our business and working for the digital locum. So it's just a word of caution. If we're really pushing that, we don't want to destabilise primary care in an unfortunate direction. Thank you.
So Darren, I'm going to take, so the word of caution from Simon about going out of area, I think we take that. Jane, did you want to come back about that? I guess it's the horizon scanning or having the view on the emerging problems that will come down the line. And then Joe, I'm assuming you put your hand up around the locum bank. So Jane, then Joe, to respond to those then, please.
Yeah, okay, very happy to. So I think certainly, and in fact, Darren's a bit frozen on my screen, so I can't see what his face looks like. But anyway, so picking at that point, yes, I mean, that's why I was really keen that we had quality and performance in the same place, so that you, and in fact, Darren has been restructuring his team, but actually also how we worked. And I think with that approach, because that performance and assurance is actually almost a team in itself that are being pulled together, and they have been responsible for developing this report. I think we've got somebody coming in to lead that very soon to do exactly as you say, Judy. It's very difficult sometimes to see the wood for the trees, but being able to, particularly with that role, which is picking out, but also sort of horizon scanning of the areas that we need to focus on. So, a really clear role. And I think the other thing is this will all, to some extent, we also need to change this as we go forward, because, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? We're having lots of conversations as a CCG board about things that are having the same conversation in individual provider boards. And we've got it wrong, haven't we? So it's no disrespect, but part of the new architecture and approach is then how do we hold the provider and the collaboratives to account, because that's been the other problem. If you hold just one individual organisation to account, that misses most of the pathway. So I think this, again, the whole pack is, I suppose, trying to get us into a space where we can at least articulate this differently. So then we can then look at this, as you say, through the lens of the local care partnerships. But somebody still has to hold the ring about those red flags that are coming up. So so I think Darren's nodding is good. He's now less frozen, so hopefully he's agreeing with me.
Yeah, can I just add something to that, Paul? Because I absolutely agree with everything that Jane's saying in terms of that oversight. I think the other thing is around how we present the data as well, Judy, because actually it's about using, rather than using what I would say are quite crude trend lines, it's about using statistical analysis, SPC charts, so plotting the dots, so we can see that middle ground where things are gradually deteriorating month on month, so we can interact and intervene on that element, so we can see almost a 6-month trend of a slow decline and act at that point. Because I can guarantee the challenges that we've talked about through Quality Assurance Committee, Primary Care Committee over the last 2 years, if we had the right statistical analysis, we probably would have seen those things happening 12 months prior. So it is that early warning, a bit of the canary in the mine type approach to the middle data.
Thanks. Joe, you're going to come back on primary care bank, and then I know John Finn, you wanted to come in on some of those points raised as well. Joe first.
Yeah, thank you. I just thought it was helpful to add a bit of context, wider context, Simon, to the observation you made, and I appreciate from an individual practice's perspective, different things will work in different ways, won't they, and have different benefits. I think first thing to say is the digital locum pool is only one of the support offers we've got available to general practice at the moment. So we do have face-to-face clinicians as well who are able to do a wider collection of things. I think it's important though to recognise that we've had, so I know the primary care team have had individual practices approaching them in the last few weeks, totally of their own volition, to say actually if we hadn't have had that support, we'd have found it really difficult to keep our doors open over the last few months. So I think it's important to recognise it has been very successful for a lot of practices, and actually a lot of the GPs and other professionals that we've got via that digital locum pool are not actually GPs that are already in our system or would likely to be working in the Devon system if we didn't have this approach. So I think it, by and large, I completely understand and accept what you said, Simon, but I think it's been a tremendous success actually, and something that we will continue to do, but alongside other areas of support as well, which the CCG has put in place specifically to help providers as they're struggling at the moment.
Thank you.
John Finn.
Yeah, Paul, if I could just come back to Simon about transfer a patient to Swelliac for complex orthopedics. So Simon, you're absolutely right. We've learned a lot from previous experiences in this, coming back maybe a decade since we started to do this bit of work. But just to absolutely assure you, for each patient, there's a package of transport, accommodation, agreed who can visit, and accommodation for visitors. And as you did, really importantly, the discharge arrangements for those patients are overseen by Carl Trimble, who's our system orthopedic lead. So the agreement to treat is not agreed until all that package is in place, actually. And I have to say now, the feedback from patients who have had their treatment already has been extremely positive. But I said, I agree, lots of learning from previous work around this.
Thank you.
Yep. Great. So, Alison, last point to you, and then we'll move on to the next item.
Thank you. Darren, your report is now really good. Lots of information in there, and it's really helpful. And I'm not going to focus on autism because we've already discussed it. But you've referred to the Torbay SEND report and said that there will be a report to be presented to an informal governing body meeting on the 7th of April. Well, I'm not aware of any meeting, and I think it really is important we have an opportunity to discuss that report. So what is planned?
Thanks, Alison. I know we've got a bit of an update in part 2 of the agenda later, but I need to go back and double check then, because I believe that we had our Thursday morning exec or NED briefing, and we were going to assume, because the individuals will be present, to take that one over informally minute so that we can agree our presence. So apologies for the perhaps miscommunication, but that will be my proposal. But hopefully Paul as chair might want to agree.
Yeah, we've got an hour in the diary for governing body briefing on that morning. So that
fine.
should, and let me know, Alison, if it's not in your diary, we'll make sure you're part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darren. So we've been going an hour and a half, and in true Paul Johnson fashion, we are a bit behind. But shall we just take 5 minutes just for people to stand up, turn around, empty and fill, and come back? So it's 10:57. Let's be having started our next item by 5 past.
Paul, you've had Anna Coles join to do the locality report. So do you want to ask her to come back at a later time?
So yes, Anna, do you want to come back at let's do 20 past, he says optimistically, but yeah, 20 to come back for 20 past. Is that all right, Anna?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll tell Derek and Tim as well.
Thanks, Simon. Okay, people, let's give it another minute. People are starting to come back. Right, John Dow, we're over to you for 8.2, the month 11 finance report.
Yep, thanks, Paul. So in the interest of time, the report that's presented starts on page 113 of the pack is, as you say, the report to the end of February, but as we are here today on the 31st of March, the last day of the financial year, I'll sort of focus on the year-end forecast that's included within that position, which confirms that we remain on target to deliver a small surplus for the year for the CCG, about £5.3 million. As I say, we remain on target to do that, and I would be confident that the month 12 report will show that. That will be the second of what I'm sure will become known as the COVID years that we will have delivered to plan financially. COVID years, particularly in terms of the financial regime that we've been operating under, and the executive summary sort of reminds us about the significant additional resource that we have received into the system to help us to deal with the challenges that we face. Particular amongst those, specifically about £140 million to deal with the direct impact of COVID, and about £39 million to support us with the restoration of elective care. And as we move into the next financial year, as Jane mentioned in her report, financial challenge starts to become an issue again. We will be bringing a report to governing body in due course on the operational plan, but it is the beginning of a reduction to COVID funding, which we have to try and match with a reduction of costs. But obviously the operational situation continues to drive significant pressure, and that is what will be the cause of the financial challenge, which, as I say, will start to come back onto the table without a doubt in the 22-23 financial year. But we do remain on target to deliver for the year just about to end. Set out in the report is the detail that we bring each month. I won't dwell on that. It does paint a picture of stability and a really sort of clear path that we've been on for some time. So I won't dwell on any more of that, Paul. I'll just pause there and pick up any questions that people might have.
Thanks very much, John. And I think it's good knowing that we are going to be going into quite a challenging year as we move out of sort of the COVID funding position. It's good to know that we're coming from a good position at the end of this particular year before we go into the next one. So it's a good starting point for the challenge that we face. So thank you very much. Any comments or questions from anyone for John on this? No? Okay. Well then, thank you very much, John. Sorry, Simon.
I just wonder whether I can ask a question where I'm conflicted or not, Paul.
It's very different.
About primary funding.
Sorry?
It's a question about primary care funding, but I may not be able to ask it if I'm conflicted.
Okay, could I ask you to pop it in just ping me an email on it, and I'll have a look. We'll move on and we'll come back to John if it's appropriate to do so. Okay, all right.
Sure, it'll be okay if as long as it's not your individual practice. I think if it's a general question, I think it probably would be okay. But
it is a general question.
If it's about your individual practice, then that might be a conflict.
Yeah,
Sure,
okay. If you're all right with it, Jane, I just wanted to, you referenced that the increase in pay for NHS staff was 3%, and that was money that we received and passed on. In primary care, we got additional uplift of 2.1%, but we have to pay our salary GP staff 3%. So there's an additional cost there. I just wonder as we go into future years whether that's going to become an issue for primary care, that previous funding agreements and arrangements that we seem to be being asked to still have agreed are going to become difficult for us if our staff are being told that they have to be funded at a different rate.
Yeah. So what I'd say on that, Simon, I mean, we are still constrained quite a lot by national rules, terms and conditions in terms of how the money flows through to primary care, albeit through delegated commissioning arrangements to us. So, you know, we'll follow what national policy is on those sorts of things. I don't know if Joe Turl wants to comment, but.
So, yeah, I suppose the only other thing I'll say is to just recognise, obviously, as you know, Simon, we are engaging on the general practice strategy as well at the moment. So I think we are considering as a system, you know, what sort of general practice needs to look like for the future, and also what system needs to do to support general practice, as well as at the same time general practice supporting the rest of the system as well. So I think it will be something we will touch on just in terms of the funding of general practice through the strategy as well. So I think probably watch this space a little bit as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Simon. So now no need to email me. All right. Okay, thanks. So there's no more questions. So Joe, it is over to you for the IUCS contract award. And I know this has been through a number of meetings, and particularly through governing body regular briefings. And then in private, one of the things you're going to do is just clarify why that decision process has been in private for us. If you can make sure you cover that in your briefing just now, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Like you say, this has been through numerous committees, not least governing body in private, and also an oversight group, which was chaired by Judy, one of our non-execs, with several other of the non-execs and executives on that group. So I think it's probably well understood in terms of why we've got to the place we've got to, and the decision that's been made. I think actually the paper itself is quite relatively short, but quite self-explanatory on most of the points. But the things I did just want to draw governing bodies' attention to is obviously that we've completed the procurement process, as you will know. The paper seeks to give assurance on the robustness of the process, and hopefully the paper does that, but happy to take any questions. As you say, Paul, we've had to do this in in private, in terms of making the final decision on the procurement, and that was due to the risks around needing to inform particularly the staff, but all of the stakeholders. So we did need to make that decision in private in January, so that we're able to first of all inform the outcome of the procurement to the bidders, so both the successful bidder and of course the incumbent as well. And it was really important then that they had an opportunity to speak to their staff, and that be done in a timely way. And then obviously in a timely way for us to communicate that with stakeholders. So unfortunately we couldn't make the decision in public, but we are bringing it here today so that you've got an oversight of the decision that's been made, and also particularly I think an overview of the next steps, I think is the important thing probably for the governing body. So the recommendations in the report are to acknowledge the completion of the process, to support the appointment of a Practice Plus group, which of course has already been made and the contract has been signed, and in particular note the next steps. So we will have a senior oversight group, which will be led by a senior member of the commissioning team, and with my executive oversight to take this forward. And I think it is really important. It won't have gone unnoticed, I'm sure, current performance at the moment of this service, and the need to work really closely with the two providers in terms of the mobilisation period, and to encourage providers and commissioners in this space to work very collaboratively over the next few months, with the hope to improving performance during this time until we get, of course, to the new provider taking over during October. So I'm not going to say anything else because, like I said, I think the report's very well written and self-explanatory, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Jo. So certainly the paper is really clear on that first point, that it describes the successful completion of the process, and it would be good for us to show our public support, having already made a decision in private for the appointment of the PPG as being the provider from October 22. So before we do that, any questions or comments for Jo? Sheila.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, having not been involved in this at all, this is a really good paper. So please, can you pass my thanks on to Helen or whoever, what member of her team wrote it? I thought it was really well done.
Thank you, Sheila. I will. Helen wrote the paper, but I know with support from people in the team, and particularly I should mention Kevin Weller as well in John's team, who's been a big part of this as well.
Thanks, Sheila. Yeah, really good point. Judy.
I just wanted to endorse the comments Jo just made about the team, but to emphasise to everyone that putting energy and effort into the mobilisation process is as important as everything we did on the contracting process. And so support for making sure that that mobilisation team is appropriately senior and appropriately resourced, because the making of a good contract is not just the tendering, it's the actual getting it going.
Yeah, I will just comment on that, Paul. You're absolutely right, Judy. I'm very pleased to say that after a 3-week holiday, Helen Bailey will be coming back to the CCG to work with me specifically on that until October.
Great. Brilliant. Okay. Thanks, Jo. I did see another hand, but it went down. So I'm not going to give it a chance to come back up again. So just within the public meeting, just to demonstrate that we show our support, just if I can get people to do the virtual thumbs up or hand clapping, whichever one you want to choose. Will be just to show that we are supportive of this process that we've been through, the robust process and the outcome from it. There you go. Thank you very much. Thanks all. So Jo, I think the governing body has fulfilled those 3 asks of you, and we look forward to hearing the progress during the transition, but also as the new provider comes in from the beginning of October. Thanks very much. So we did defer them to 11:20, so we're almost there. I'm just trying to see whether we've got any of our locality directors joined us as yet. I don't think we have yet, have we, Simon?
No, they're all coming back in at 11:20. I've spoken to all of them.
Okay, well then let's take the committee chairs reports, because certainly the finance and primary care were for noting. So just to check, Graham, anything you want to particularly raise from the finance chairs report?
No, I've nothing to add, thank you.
Okay, and Judy from the primary care commissioning report, committee report?
No, nothing to add.
Okay, and actually the quality committee, again, it was just to note the report, wasn't it, Glynis? Anything you want to highlight from that?
No, nothing.
Nothing. Okay, so then the only items left, because oh no, audit. Sorry, audit is verbal. Has there been?
Yes, please, Chair. I'll be very brief, but the committee only met last week, so the minutes haven't been typed up yet. But we did have a rather challenging discussion with the auditors in regard of the Section 256 payments that the board has already approved that we'll be making to Devon County Council and Plymouth and Torbay City Councils. And I am really disappointed that the auditors have not been prepared to give us a firm view on whether or not everything we've now done satisfies their requirements, despite the fact that we did just about, I think, secure recognition from them that we've taken all of the action that they recommended last year, despite the fact that we didn't actually agree that all that action was necessarily needed. We've done it anyway, and still they won't make the commitment to say that the Section 256 are good to go. And the line they're taking is that that advice has to go through their national team. Why their national team couldn't have made their mind up 3 months ago is frankly beyond me. And I just wanted the GB to be cognizant of that.
Okay.
I don't know if John Dow wants to add anything, Chair.
Yeah, if I could, please, Chair. So Nick's right. We were ideally looking for a view before the auditors issue their formal opinion on the transactions. We weren't able to get that. We do, however, continue to work with them in terms of responding to questions and providing evidence to support the opinion that they will have to draw. So still working to get a positive outcome, but we are very much working together on it.
Okay. Thanks, John. Thanks, Nick. Okay, Simon, you've got your hand up.
Could I just mention to Graham, at the end of his report, it talks about risk 160, being that the operational plan for next year may not be deliverable within the resources allocated to the system. I just wondered, and maybe asking NHS England to re-evaluate the score, what the score is and how risky that risk is seen to be.
Yeah, if I could clarify, Chair, we're asking our own finance team to reassess the score. At the moment, we reported this risk through the last board meeting and indicated that the inability to meet that plan would have implications for SOF 4. The board noted that, governing body noted that, but it is at the moment, it scored quite lowly. I think as we've got more detail on the operational plan, and John might be reporting on this a little later on and at the next governing body meeting, it's become clear that that score is a little low, needs to be readjusted, and John and his team will be looking to update that score. And as you've hinted, the discussions that Jane and the team are having with the regional team will, I think, provide some information as to how much we need to jack that score up.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. All right. Our locality directors are now here, so welcome Tim, Anna and Derek. Well, certainly Tim and Derek. Have I seen Anna? Yes, Anna, welcome. Yes, all three of you are here. Brilliant. So that's the items that we have remaining in our agenda today. That's item 9 from page 144 onwards. We've got the reports in front of us, so thank you all for pulling those together, because that gives us an insight of what's actually happening in each of our geographies. So if we go round the compass as sort of laid out in the papers and start with South, Derek, just pull out some of those highlights and key issues within the paper that you'd like to bring to our attention.
Yeah, so I'll do a bit of South and a bit of West, if that's okay. So as the report says, I'm not going to read it out to you. Everybody's aware of the significant challenge at the minute, particularly around Torbay and our South LCP in terms of the workforce and local market challenges. We're working hard with system partners on where we are. Had seen signs of recovery at the time of writing the report. Obviously, that's worsened with the COVID numbers, etc., over recent weeks. There's definitely more we can do, even if only to make sure the actions that people are taking are clear and the visibility of those actions between system partners. So we're doing that with a refocus on the ambulance handover improvement arrangements and system flow arrangements, and a refocus of the South Urgent Care Board, and being clear about the membership secretary. It's gone through a few iterations, and we're landing on something we think will take us forward. Many people, as we would expect, are sort of knee deep in the challenge of the here and now, but making sure we've got sufficient headspace to plan the road ahead is where we're focusing our efforts, while still trying to pay attention to that. in terms of the current challenges. So I say we're trying to put that in place from next week in terms of the South Urgent Care arrangements, and obviously working with system partners again as the ICS arrangements and LCP arrangements as part of that develop. So again, playing a key role in the sort of organisational development arrangements, session of which there is this afternoon from a broader system perspective in terms of how those arrangements continue to play out, such that we can attach the evolving LCP arrangements to those as well. But like I say, it's just making sure our focus is dealing with the challenges of the here and now, being clear about the actions being taken, and then being visible to system partners, and making sure we've got sufficient headspace and clarity to describe the road ahead as well. Not that challenge is easy and it's that black and white, but that's where we are. So that was it. All I was going to say from a South perspective. I've also got a small update on West, but I noticed someone.
Yeah, well, should we just bring Lincoln in on the South then before you move on? But for general GB comments or questions, what I'll do is I'll go around each of the localities, and then we'll do questions, because there may be common themes that come out. So we'll do questions at the end of the updates. But Lincoln, just because I suspect yours is specifically related to the South, I'll bring you in now.
Yes, thanks so much. Largely because, Derek, I'm more familiar with the details. What I wondered about was whether in the South's report, and this may go for some of the others with the potential exception of Plymouth, that there are some other priorities that have been indicated. So I know for South, for example, emphasis on self-harm, children in care, etc. Those aren't reflected in the report. So it's difficult if you're coming in to recognize that there are some systems things which are pretty important. And for example, as you know, there's a lot of work on the back of the SEND review and the written statement of action that we are developing. You know, things like that you would expect to see also reflected in the report. So I wonder, that's a specific for South, but there may be some of those general principles that apply across the other locality reports as well.
Yeah, so if I may just come back on that. So I think you're right, Lincoln. So we had a focus at our last delivery group, which was post the writing of this report, which was largely based on February around SEND, and also around the actions in respect of self-harm and suicide. And as you know, we've had those sessions in terms of the health and wellbeing board arrangements as well. So there is a balance to strike, as you say, about the current pressures and priorities and the broader programmes of work, particularly around the couple of things you've mentioned, accepted. But it's also a timing thing for this month in terms of when that actually went through the delivery group arrangement. So yeah, but points noted.
Okay, thanks, Derek. Do you want to cover South then? Sorry, West.
So it's just so obviously Anna's going to come on to the sort of broader Plymouth and Western system, but just a couple of things I wanted to make mention of. So specifically around the West LCP, the Place Development Programme started on the 22nd of March. So good leadership, good engagement, PHM session this week, looking at the PHM module, and looking specifically at the those who face mental health challenges, including children and people who are frail or at risk of frailty. So there's a focus on that. I mean, some governing body members would have been part of those sessions, either the first or the second one. And so that's making good progress, and we are thankful for people's commitment to that programme of work, particularly at a time of increasing challenge. The VCSE discharge coordination in community hospitals in South Hams and West Devon is progressing well, as is the strength and balance, which we're hoping to have in place in May. So I just wanted to reference those specific points in terms of West LCP.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sheila, did you want to comment specifically about West? Okay, yeah.
Yes, I did, because I was going to actually say what Derek did, and you stole my thunder, Derek, but that's reasonable under the circumstances. No, that's fine. I was a member of that, and I have to say I was a little dubious about what the benefit of the place-based programme would be. I attended my first workshop yesterday because I was away last week, so I couldn't go to the first one. And I have to say, for the first time, it really feels like it's a place in the sense of place compared to how it's felt with Plymouth. So I actually, my expectation at the beginning of the meeting was fairly low, it's fair to say, and by the end of it I felt much more optimistic, and I'm now you know, fully prepared to be engaged with the programme, whereas before I was dragging my heels a bit, if I'm honest. So well done, Derek.
Thank you. Well, I'll feed it back to Emma and the team. So
yes,
thank you for that, Sheila.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Ruth, I've just seen you've got to go. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so then actually that takes us on. Plymouth was the next one on our sheet, which ties in nicely, having just had the West update. Anna.
Thank you, Chair. So obviously I'll take it that the report's been read. I think highlights to pull out, so I would echo, and I think you'll get this theme from all locality directors, very much a focus at the moment on the here and now, significant pressures across the urgent and emergency care system, and I think striving to have the balance between the here and now in terms of that activity and then planning for the future as well. So a lot of focus around ambulance handover, a lot of focus around system flow and in terms of discharge planning, both in terms of practice and additional capacity creation. So you'll see in the report that the Willwell Dementia Assessment Unit has now opened, and that's opened since we last met. So really delighted to have that step down facility, good partnership work at place with clinical support from Livewell, and we are starting to see some movement in terms of Plymouth patients from the acute hospital and out into that facility. Still more work to do, but some green shoots, and certainly at the time of writing the report, I think our green shoots looked a little healthier than perhaps they do today in terms of COVID prevalence. So significant impact across all parts of the sector. So 49 facilities just in the Plymouth local authority footprint alone today across supported living, domiciliary care and care homes. So that is challenging to manage that flow and keep up with the pace in terms of hospital discharge. As Derek's described, ongoing work in terms of local care partnership development. So I think, Plymouth as a place, is recognisable in terms of the historical partnership working that we've got in place. Really looking at the priorities that we've set and how we pull out the areas that will have greatest impact in terms of urgent and emergency care flow, but a wider landscape than that as well. And then finally, I think I would say clearly colleagues will remember that we launched the integrated care partnership arrangements from July of last year. We are in the process currently of reviewing year one in, acknowledging that COVID clearly has had significant impact across the system, and then collectively working through and agreeing the priorities for year two. Some of that will clearly be around resilient and a workforce that will support us over the coming months. I think nothing much else to pull out in terms of highlights, but absolutely happy to take any questions from colleagues today.
Great. Anna, thank you very much, and both of you, some really good positive signs of things happening within those localities. Let's continue going around and then we'll take questions after that. So Tim, do you want to take us through East and North?
Thank you, Paul. So I'll just go through each in turn. So just draw out a few things from the East. So couple of pieces of work around urgent emergency care that aren't just unique to the kind of daily flow. So a couple of projects that are being worked on, one around low acuity attendances at ED and one around frequent attenders, trying to mirror and build upon the high flow work that's been done in North Devon. Very pleased to say that we've got some extra university civic fund support for that. So I've been involved with the university and they're providing some research support towards that. We're hoping to have schemes developed that can be applied and run differently from winter. So there's a test going on there. Also in the East, I think our relationship with the voluntary and community sector is developing really positively following our conference back last autumn. So we've now got 3 sub-locality settings, Exeter, Eastern Devon and Mid Devon, with a representative or an expert professional. We can't represent the voluntary sector, it's too diverse, but an expert from each of those sectors attending our stakeholder forum, the Eastern Locality Forum, and good work going on with some investments at neighbourhood level, particularly around discharge funding that we've had over the winter. The other thing just to reflect, and this will be the same for North Devon as well, this balance between keeping the business as usual going and the daily reporting and flow of patients through and out hospital is massively impacting on the development of local care partnerships. And just to say that, we were expecting and hoping to run a development day next week. That will not take place now because the position of particularly secondary care support to that is not available at the moment. So I think that's a major risk for us, and I think it's probably what Anna and Derek have said too. If I may move on to the north, that risk similarly applies to the north. Two immediate things spring to mind. One is our position around minor injuries units, principally in Bideford, where there is major building works going on, and secondly in Ilfracombe. We do not have minor injuries units operating, and that is for two reasons, principally staffing, but also in the case of Bideford, building works. I cannot see that position changing, so there'll be some immediate work in the north of Devon, particularly with the summer influx of tourists, to find better and alternative mechanisms. So last summer we had some good work done with other institutions, but that remains a significant risk factor for us. And the other big factor, I think, in the North of Devon is Cornwall patients, where we've had some significant issues with discharges into Cornwall. That is now being more robustly managed. And finally, probably John Warmth is on the call, but One Northern Devon continues with this range of preventative schemes through its board arrangements. They continue to develop through our One Northern Devon and One Towns initiatives. Some fantastic work going on there. And if I may, I'll send the link to the One Northern Devon board report, which I think is really worth a read, to go out with a minute. So there's lots of excellent work, very local, very neighbourhood level going on that is worth a read, which makes a real impact and difference to local communities. So I'll stop there, John. Paul, thank you very much.
Tim, that's really helpful. Thank you very much. And a good mix, but ending there on some of the really positive opportunities that are coming there through One Northern Devon. So, OK, so open to any comments or questions for either Derek, Tim or Anna. Sheila.
This is probably for Tim, I think. So I noticed the comment about the enhanced levels of communication between Devon and Cornwall commissioners for patients who are residents of one county but being discharged from a hospital in another county. Are we having similar conversations with Somerset? Because there is a number of overlapping practices on the Devon-Somerset border as well.
It doesn't come to my attention that there is quite the same. I mean, what's caused this to happen is a particular issue around discharge flow from NDHT into Cornwall, and that's caused us to have a further conversation. That is not the same thing I get with Somerset, but your point is well made. And interesting, you say Somerset. I think I did have a conversation with Dorset actually around what is affectionately known as the Far East. How practices in Axminster were crossing over there. So I think there are relationships. They're necessarily driven by the immediacy and urgency, which I think is mostly Cornwall, but you're absolutely right. The boundaries, Somerset, Dorset, are equally important, and we need to do a bit more on that.
And I think historically there have always been bumpy rides for patients that do have those unfortunate geographical issues, particularly around community nursing as well, palliative care. So it's always worth keeping a bit of an eye on it to make sure that there aren't new issues arising as new teams come into play.
Yeah, I mean, good point, Sheila and Tim. So what I get a sense from you is that you're not detecting the same level of either the volume or the level of challenge that we've had across the Devon-Cornwall border with the other two borders that we share, but worth monitoring. John W.
I'm just going to add to this conversation. Of course, what is unique is that we have a primary care network that stretches across Devon and Cornwall border, and that's created challenges for the PCN, but also for the local people. So there's one thing about flow from the acute trusts, but also our PCN is working hard to provide an equal service right across the border, having to deal with two different teams, two different CCGs, but they're coping quite well at the moment. Bit of a challenge though.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thank you. Okay, Graham.
Thank you, Chair. This is really not a question for the colleagues who've presented the reports, which are all excellent. And forgive me, it's something I've raised before. But all of the reports referred to workforce issues, and it's an issue John Womersley raised earlier about not just COVID, but also difficulties in recruitment. perhaps Jane or Simon can just help me understand, where are the discussions happening about the workforce issue generally across Devon, and where's the debate and what are we doing about it? What initiatives are we bringing forward? Because we keep getting it mentioned in all these little reports. Who's taking the overview?
Yeah, Jane.
Well, I'm happy to try that. So we do have a people and well, we're in the process of changing all the names because they're all wrong, but there is a people board. I chair it, and that's with Darren and Paul Renshaw, who is our Director of Workforce Strategy, and currently it has local authority representation as well as from acute and finance and primary care. So I think the membership probably needs to slightly change. There is work on pulling together the strands of all of that, and using some of the analysis from HEE as well as all of our other sources to actually give a real picture of what the workforce situation is today, but actually, of course, more importantly, for tomorrow as well. And this is also really tightly tied into our operating plan. So, and part of, I'm sure John will agree, at the moment, we've got a real mismatch, shall we say, between what has happened in terms of workforce growth versus actual productivity. And then you overlay that with the vacancy and retention rates or turnover rates. There are, red balloons going off everywhere. So there are currently 3 workforce strands that have picked up, particularly around the recruitment and in retention, and also in sort of future, I suppose, commissioning of what we need. But actually, the workforce strategy, which I think certainly Paul is aiming, I'm hoping we're aiming to have at least a first draft by the end of May, but I think June is the deadline, well, it's the sort of target date. We'll actually hopefully set out the sort of the roadmap of what we need to do. But I think certainly from my perspective, what we need to sort of do is not sort of have workforce people and culture and OD sort of sitting in a box, in the corner. It actually is one of our biggest priorities, and I think that needs to be brought out as part of the sort of priority setting for NHS Devon going forward. It's people, performance, and finance. So I can reassure you, there is actually a slide deck that we can share, which gives a little bit of a flavour, certainly, of some of the analysis that's been done, which I think we'll share that with governing body. It's quite, as I say, quite interesting, looking at some of the historical trends. And then the other thing to say is, as part of the governance of the Integrated Care Board, there will be a people and culture oversight group, which will be chaired by one of the non-execs as well, but the powerhouse sort of stuff will continue.
Great. Thank you very much, Shane. Yeah, I think that'd be really useful to share that. I think that'd be really useful to see. John, thank you for putting the One Northern Devon report in the chat. We'll make sure it goes out with the minutes as well, because obviously the members of the public won't necessarily be able to access that chat. So anyone who then wants to be able to can through the minutes of the meeting. Okay. Any more questions or comments? In which case, I'm going to formally close the public meeting. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John.
Just for instance, I troubled my hand earlier on when you're doing the minutes in the last meeting, Paul. That was all. Section 14, the Northern Report. If I could change the wording a little bit, I can do that offline. But where it says the LCP is being effective in moving beyond the wider determinants of health, that's not quite correct. It was actually it's now working into the wider determinants of health. So if I can change the wording slightly, Paul. Right.
So it's into them rather than beyond them. Exactly is the wording. Right, yeah. If that's all the wording, then that's fine. And then I will just sign off the adjusted copy. Then that's fine if people are happy to leave that one with me. Okay, thanks, John. Okay, so members of the governing body, if we dial off now, let's start the private meeting 10 minutes early. So let's start at 10 to 12 rather than 12 o'clock. So we've still got a little bit of a break before we move over to that. And I will see you